You just heard from Eva Malecki. She's the communications director for the U.S. Capitol Police. Not a lot of information other than what we've been able to confirm as we've been reporting this in the last 20 minutes or so here on CBSN, which is that according to Communications Director Malecki, this was a traffic stop. This was a person who was asked to pull over, to stop at a checkpoint.
They were driving erratically.
They were driving erratically. And then there were shots fired. No one was hit, according to the U.S. Capitol Police. And she said, and this is what's important, I think, for people who may be watching, that there is no nexus to terrorism. She called it, quote, a traffic stop. Ron Hosko, who's a CBS News security analyst and a former assistant director of the FBI, is still on the phone with us. So, Ron, not a lot of information there, but given your level of expertise and your experience, what did you learn from what you heard there?
Well, not much more than what we've seen on TV for the last hour or so this morning. And I did see what looked like a female being taken into custody. You know, this is really very much the challenge of police in America, where you have someone who is not following instructions for whatever reason. You know, again, the Capitol is visited by certainly millions of people every year, the Capitol area, and you know. Could they be facing someone who is old, hearing impaired, did not hear your instructions, and they're acting erratically because they didn't understand your instructions, and you expect them to be compliant? It could be any number of reasons. You know, somebody wandered into a protected area, and all of a sudden they see the police, and they know they have some substance in their car that they shouldn't have, and they think they're going to get in trouble, and they want to get out of there. So this is, you know, why police need good training. They need good intelligence, because you don't know if it is a real threat, if this is terror-inspired probe or activity. Certainly all of the Capitol Police officers have seen the repeated attempts at the White House in just the last few weeks. And so they have to be alert to these sorts of things. And, you know, fortunately here, more often than not, it is someone who did not understand the instructions. It is a low-level criminal incident, somebody who's mentally impaired, or somebody who's in a mental health crisis.
Yeah, we've certainly seen people.
Quickly resolved.
We've certainly seen that, Ron. People in a mental health crisis or having some sort of mental health issue. I mean, in this case, we know that the driver was driving erratically. That's what got the attention of police. When they tried to pull her over, she pulled a U-turn and nearly hit someone and was not stopping. Shots were fired. It actually is quite remarkable that no one was hurt, because this is an area, like you pointed out, Ron, that's typically pretty congested. It's a nice day outside, and you know, when the weather breaks, people head outside. It really is, well, once again, pretty remarkable that it ended the way that it's ended.
Absolutely. Ron, stand by just one moment. I want to bring in CBS News Capitol Hill producer Catherine Reynolds. She's joining us now by phone from the scene. So, Catherine, what can you tell us?
Hi, guys. We are right next to where the incident happened, and there's a heavy police presence here. I would say maybe about a half dozen to a dozen vehicles, but it seems like it's very isolated. I mean, Capitol Hill is a large area, and from what we can tell, it's isolated to one block. It also appears to be very much under control. And when I got here this morning, I walked from the Senate side of the Capitol to the House side of the Capitol, and I had no problems moving around. So, you know, it's very common for different parts of the Hill to go on lockdown. And so just the fact that I could, like, move around easily this morning, you know, makes me think that, you know, people aren't overly concerned about this. That's just my read on it from, you know, being here for a couple of hours now.
So, yeah, and it's interesting, Ron, if you're still on the phone with us, and it's something that Anne-Marie was just touching on. I think, you know, sometimes, and you said something also, Ron, that sort of made me think, which is if you've got something in your car that you're not supposed to have, or if you've got an outstanding warrant, and you see police officers, you might not, as a operator of a vehicle, think to yourself, I'm really close to the Capitol, I'm really close to the White House, and tensions are high, and police officers are on alert. You just see a police officer, and you're like, I got to get out of here.
Well, that's absolutely true, and D.C. is cut into four quadrants, and sadly, you know, northeast and southeast, there is D.C. There is, you know, the bulk of the violent crime is committed in northeast and southeast. where there are relatively regular shootings and murders. And so could this be something totally unrelated to the Capitol? They strayed into the wrong area not knowing what they were bumping into, and something else was going on that distracted them or in their life or in their vehicle, and all of a sudden you have an incident like this.
And Catherine, what's it like on a typical day? I mean, we're talking about the heightened awareness, the tensions that certainly police officers feel, and also the Secret Service, because there have been a couple of incidents at the White House. What is the posture like when you're going to work, when you're leaving work, when you're going by some of these corridors of power?
Yeah, well, you have to remember that there are folks who work on the Hill every day. So they're officers we know, and they know us. So we feel comfortable with them. But what I was going to say is that it is, I can see how people who aren't familiar with the Hill can easily be intimidated and even scared. And I know it's unintentional by the officer and police presence. I mean, even when I was walking over to the scene today, an officer, I don't want to say he was yelling at me, but he was using, he was very intense. And I was walking someplace and he didn't want me to walk there, and he was like, move now. And so, I of course like, absolutely, but I can see how if you're someone who's not familiar, not used to that it's very intimidating and could be scary. So yeah, I definitely think that, that an incident can happen when you have someone unfamiliar with this area.
Yeah, the thing about the Capitol, though, Catherine, is that it is really sort of a city planned out for the people. It's one of the things we sort of pride ourselves on when it comes to these public institutions, that they are open and available to the people, that you can actually sign up and take a tour of the White House if you want to. It's one of the things that is, I think, unique to America. And I wonder, Ron, that's got to present an additional challenge, that these areas in and around the Capitol, they need to be very open. It's these buildings are buildings for the people.
That's exactly right. We are taxpayers. We are citizens. We want to have that sort of access. I'll tell you, I was up there a week ago, and of course I went through the magnetometer. But once I was in, I'm in one of the Senate office buildings, and I'm walking past senators and congressmen. They're going about their business. I'm going about mine. There's, the police presence is at the entrances and exits, but it's not like they're marching the halls, preventing you from knocking on a congressman or a senator's door and asking for their time. So we want that sort of open access. And it can be a challenge for Capitol Police and Secret Service and others who are trying to protect these institutions, striking the right balance between intimidation and locking it down, and as you say, open and letting tourists come through. And I have to, give the Capitol Police great credit. I think they strike that balance quite well every day. As you can walk right up to the building, you can walk into the visitor center and walk through the halls of Congress if you're so inclined. And that's what a free America should allow.
Absolutely. Cat Reynolds, our Capitol Hill producer, is also on the phone with us. Cat, I'm curious, what is the protocol, if you know, the protocol in Congress for incidents like this? Are legislators made aware, or does it have to rise to a certain level before you interrupt a congressman or a senator with the information? What's that typically like?
Sure. When there is an incident, an email will immediately go out to everyone who's working on the Hill just to notify them of what is happening. Because as you can imagine, word spreads pretty quickly up here, and it's easy just to kind of get frightened. Like, we had a crew outside another room that is very far away from where this is happening, and they saw an increased presence of officers. They saw officers. I don't want to say they were drawing their weapons, because that's not correct, but there was an increased presence, and so they knew something was happening. And just to kind of follow up to what you guys were just talking about, it is an interesting place because it is a mixture of access and no access, right? So in the Capitol, you have a space where the Speaker of the House works, And there is so much security around him. And right outside his office are everyday Americans, touring what essentially is a museum. So it really is an interesting mix of people being able to, walk the halls, but then all of a sudden running into a door that you cannot go into. And I totally agree. I think the Capitol Police do a very good job of balancing that.
Just to remind everyone, what we're covering right now was an incident that happened in the Capitol Hill area by the Botanic Garden. It appears as if it was really something more criminal in nature than certainly not terrorist in nature. An erratic driver on the road. Police tried to stop her. When they tried to stop her, she pulled a U-turn and almost ran over another police officer. They pursued her, and in trying to capture her, shots were fired. Police fired shots. She is in custody now. You can see the area is still cordoned off, but the situation appears to be under control. And Vlad, you pointed out that cars are zipping by. You can see people on the street quite nearby. Clearly there's an investigation taking place, but in terms of any ongoing threat related to this, it seems to be not an issue, at least right now.
And Ron, that's got to be part of the strategy of law enforcement everywhere, which is once a threat is deemed not a threat anymore, that in order to keep people at ease, to keep business as usual, you will immediately take down that police tape, except for the area where you need to keep it, and let traffic resume and let people go about their business.
Well, that's right, Vlad. You want to do that, and you see that on the streets and highways of America, where maybe a traffic incident and the state police or whatever organization is involved wants to keep traffic flowing and get it moving. Part of the protocols of the Capitol Police and others are to avoid over-responding. And I know there was some criticism of, some of the Capitol Police tactical folks several years ago when we had the Navy Yard shooting. It was just blocks away, probably within a mile of the Capitol, was the Washington Navy Yard. And, as the calls went out for an active shooter, of course, every law enforcement officer and agency in the D.C. area was responding over there. And Capitol Police had some tactical folks that started to respond and then were pulled back. And they have their own responsibilities. And, if the concern was that what was going on at the Navy Yard, even though deadly, could have been a diversion. And so you don't want your tactical people out of place at that moment. There was some back and forth about it. I know it found its way into some after-action reports, but part of their protocols are to not over-respond because of the risk that it is a diversion, that there is a criminal or a terrorist intent, and you're trying to pull me away to a location so that the real attack can start somewhere else.
Yeah, and
Police and law enforcement across the globe are worried about those sorts of potentials.
Ron, you touched on something a little bit earlier about, police not knowing what they're dealing with when they see erratic behavior. You touched on the fact that, sometimes they're dealing with somebody who's having a mental health crisis. Can we talk a little bit more about that? Because it certainly seems like a number of these incidents lead back to that. It appears as if the man who hopped over the fence of the White House may have been having some mental health issues, but it pops up over and over again, and the challenge for law enforcement when dealing with this sort of thing.
Right. When you're first engaging with someone of that nature, their mental health state may manifest itself immediately in something they say. And you talk about the recent White House incident where this gentleman was reportedly on the grounds for 15 plus minutes. That has its own set of concerns. But then, when he's encountered by the Secret Service, he says something about, I have an appointment with the president. Yeah. I have a meeting with the president. Well, that's an indicator, if you've hopped the fence, that perhaps that meeting is in your head. And these guys, when they first encounter them, you're trying to take it all in and understand, is this mental health? I mentioned Aaron Alexis over at the Washington Navy Yard. Alexis was driven, we believed, by thoughts in his mind, that he was being controlled. His thoughts were being controlled by electromagnetic pulse. And that was his driver for killing a dozen people at the Washington Navy Yard. But, if I'm the law enforcement officer who's responding to that, all I know is there's the sounds of gunfire and people are dying. I don't have time to, be a mental health technician at that moment or clinician to make that evaluation. I know objectively what I can observe and touch and feel and sense, and that is there's a threat. There may be a weapon. There may be an erratically driven car, and I find out about mental health as a driving force after the fact. And so, law enforcement officers are going to have to respond to what they're presented with. And right now, the immediate threat is, hey, there's a vehicle that is being driven by somebody that's not responding to my commands, not responding to the law enforcement in the area, and they're posing a threat to others and may require them, and this will have to be reviewed by, I think, as the spokesperson said, the internal affairs folks of Capitol Police to see, did they follow their protocols? Were they, if they fired shots, was deadly force, which firing shots is, was deadly force required at that time? Was that a good judgment or not?
And that'll be the information that our reporters will be digging to over the next couple of hours. CBS News security analyst Ron Hosko, also former assistant director of the FBI. Thank you, as always, my friend, for your analysis, your expertise. We appreciate it. Also, CBS News Capitol Hill producer Catherine Reynolds, who also joined us to break this down for us. We really appreciate it.